everyone, to Be Elite Pod. I'm Shawn Michael.
And I'm Party Johnnetty. And together, we are the PodRockers.
The PodRockers recording BEP live from our home elite studios to bring you the PodRocker Nation, the very best in AEW wrestling commentary. And this week we are bringing you a BEP house show, a wrestler spotlight. It's going to be two wrestlers, as the house show we are featuring today is the Young Bucks.
That's right. I'm really excited about this one. We decided to come up with sort of a different episode while we wait on what's happening next with AEW. And so we thought, why not actually spotlight some of the guys that are helping to start this up?
Yeah, there's so many of these wrestlers that a lot of people are starting to get exposed to. I'm starting to get exposed to. So what great opportunity to kind of talk about some of these great athletes and, you know, talk about even some of the, like with the Young Bucks, how they started out and how they got to here. So, John, you are kind of a historic aficionado of the PodRocker, so I'll kind of let you set the stage. We got a couple of different pieces we'll talk about with them, kind of their pre-wrestling and indie wrestling history, but go ahead and jump in. I'm going to be the kid that asks, like, well, why'd they do that? Well, why'd they do that? So be prepared for a ton of questions, but go ahead and just kind of get us into this wrestler spotlight, if you will.
Will do. And I just got to say, hopefully I can answer a majority of your questions. I know I'm not the best. I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of things or a great photographic memory, but I do know what I like, and I do like the Young Bucks. So I've followed them for some time now. I was personally introduced to the Young Bucks probably around 2012, 2013. And I was thinking, oh man, starting to get into not getting back into wrestling, but also exploring the world of independent wrestling as well. YouTube is also a great historical tool. You can find some wonderful matches on there if you want to learn more about the Young Bucks as well. I think one thing that's not that big of a surprise with the Young Bucks that everyone basically who's listening to this podcast is they were wrestling fans. And they actually had their father built them, they had him build them a wrestling ring pretty much in their backyard, and it all went from there. Matt Jackson is the older of the two, and he, of course, he's older by about 4 years, I think. He was born in 85 and Nick in 89. So Matt goes off to wrestling school first. He then took what he learned along with one of his friends, and then they taught all their friends as well, kind of how to wrestle Nick as well. And then Nick eventually goes to school and learns there as well. But They just took this and they did kind of backyard wrestling. And I know nowadays, backyard, I don't know if it's so big now in the present in 2019, but I know that there was a time period between the late 90s to the late 2000s, I would say, where backyard wrestling really became a thing. And I know, obviously, even look at Mick Foley, wrestling with kids has always been a thing, no matter how many times the WWF/WWE or WCW told you don't try this at home. Kids can't help themselves. That's just how we are. And I mean, I'm no different. I had my backyard days behind me when I was younger too. So I think partially the reason why I like the Young Bucks is that we are similar in age, and I feel like they did what I've always wanted to do. And so it's kind of like living vicariously through them, even though we were pretty much in different parts of the United States, almost east and west. So yeah, pretty big wrestling fans. Obviously you can see their influence with the Hardy Boys. And they took it from there, and they became what they are now.
Yeah, it's kind of like those hockey stories of the dads that would, freeze their backyard so their kids could play hockey in the backyard.
Yeah.
I you and I are similar age as these guys. I loved wrestling when I was growing up, and I did the same thing. Like, I had a pillow, I'd body slam it off the top rope, which was the couch.
Yep.
And if my dad would have made me a ring in the backyard, that'd have been awesome. All I had was a trampoline, but I made it work. Mm-hmm. My kid, he's 3. He's like, he has barely seen any wrestling, and he wants to wrestle all the time. So, like, it's just something ingrained in children and, just coming up in age. And I don't know, do you really feel like you see many wrestlers nowadays that would be kind of the same kind of fan? Like, they grew up like true fans and kind of fell into it like they did? Or I mean, what have you seen for that? I feel like you'd have to be a fan to get into wrestling like they do, but it seems like they're a little bit different.
Yeah, it depends, right? I know right now, a lot of the guys, especially on the independent scene, you're not going to find too many people that weren't wrestling fans to begin with. A good majority of them are. You do have that situation nowadays where, thanks to the WWE and now their performance center, they want to kind of look outside of the mold and get people that have or have some sort of athletic ability, the charisma outside of the world of wrestling, and bring them in. And it makes sense because you're always going to have your wrestling fans. Now you're trying to make new fans. And how do you do that? Going into other territories. So you will actually hear from some of the wrestlers themselves. They'll have tryouts with the WWE. And just not too long ago, Jeff Cobb spoke about the fact that he who was in the Olympics, even, he was trying out, doing a tryout for the WWE, and he stumbled upon one of the guys' lists. And on the list, it said independent guys, and on the other list, it said athletes. And, it's like, yeah, it's kind of like negative in a way because Jeff Cobb here, he's a dude who not only is he wrestling on the independent scene, but he actually wrestled in the Olympics, and it wasn't for USA. I think it was for Guam or something. He was a part of their team, and he saw himself under the independents, and he's like, "What?" But you're seeing that now. They want to see how well, and I think on one hand, you now get this whole independent wrestlers kind of get more of the magnifying glass on them, just because they want to start new people and they want to take someone who's never done it and build them up. Whereas with independent guys, they already have some sort of knowledge behind it. And you got to try to break those habits that just don't work well with the WWE. And to make a long answer out of your simple question, I do think still a majority of wrestlers today are wrestling fans. You get into the WWE and the Performance Center now, guys going up through like the NXT stuff. Yeah, you still have a majority of them that are wrestling fans, but you have the few in there that have never watched wrestling in their life, but they're like, hey, it's either they think it's going to be an easy paycheck or they want to branch out. They know that they have a shelf life with the NFL or even MMA, basketball, all different sorts of sports. All the meanwhile, WWE is hoping that these guys bring in new fans to be like, oh, like look at Ronda Rousey, for instance, coming in from the world of MMA, bringing over her fans to see the wrestling side of things. And it seems to be working.
Yeah, I mean, you come for the Ronda and you kind of stay for the wrestling kind of thing.
Yeah, right. Yep.
So with these guys, they Matt goes out, he learns how to wrestle, he comes back. I know, and I guess going back to your point too about like, the independent and the athletes, when you kind of come in with that following too, it's probably really difficult because, when you get into the bigger stages like the WWE, they kind of want to give you your character and you become that where, I went back, like you said, YouTube is the place to see matches. I've been seeing some Jon Moxley stuff coming back from his, backyard days. Mm-hmm. And I watched some of those matches, and those are brutal, brutal matches. And it's no wonder they wanted to change his name when he got to the WWE. It's like, we basically want to kill your brand of Jon Moxley and turn you into this other thing.
Yeah, right.
And what I think is interesting, like the Young Bucks created their own brand. They've never been, as far as I know, they've never been in like the WWE or like any of their performance center or anything like that, correct? Like they've always been on their own.
So they've had a stint in the WWE, but not like you would think. Matt Jackson came in singles as pretty much enhancement talent. And that's the nice way of saying a jobber. And if you're now listening and you hardly know what wrestling is, jobber is basically the guy that you bring in to make the other guy look good. So they always lose. And he only wrestled a couple matches like that, but also both Nick and Matt came in and they actually, which is kind of funny, they dressed up as Triple H and Shawn Michaels. And I think it was John Morrison and The Miz beat them up as
nice.
Triple H and Shawn Michaels. So, I mean, that's their stint with the WWE. They've had tryouts with them in the past and whatnot. There's been mixed talks about whether they've actually ever been offered anything with them or not. I don't think the Bucks have ever said they've been offered anything, though they've been brought in numerous times to have tryouts with them.
Yeah, no, I've always heard that, and like I said, it might just be a rumor, it might just kind of be hearsay, but that they were offered like, a multi-million-dollar contract to join the WWE. I don't know at what point when, but I go back to, I'm just starting to go back through their Be the Elite, and I'm like on episode 12. And like you think about that, like the stuff that they're going through, and they're kind of, they're pretty big at that point in 2016. They're going over to Japan, they're doing all these big events. But you think that's only 2 years before All Out or All In, and it's 2.5 years before AEW becomes established.
Yeah,
and it's just crazy to think how quick all that turns. And the Be the Elite and all that stuff had to be a big part of getting that groundwork laid so they could create this AEW wrestling organization.
Oh, for sure. It definitely was. I think what they did with Being the Elite was not anything new. Colt Cabana, who at the time before that was kind of known as the indie darling, he was doing a lot of these types of backstage recordings and whatnot. I'm trying to think off the top of my head what he called it, but he did it so that it was like the Wrestling Diaries or the some Road Chronicles or something like that. But you had to like buy those. And some of the other guys were doing stuff like Kevin Steen, aka Kevin Owens. He was doing his own little type of like sit down show. Then there was the Best Friends, Chuck Taylor and Trent Beretta doing their stuff. A lot of this stuff all comes out close in the same time, but Being the Elite, they launched it on YouTube. So that was the smart thing, because even though they were not making any money at the time off of it, you're getting more eyes on it. Whereas some of these other guys, their stuff would get leaked onto YouTube secondhand, and only like bits and parts of it would. So they did something that to me was smart. And it is one of those things where you look at it and it's like, okay, well, to try to make money, you got to spend money type of thing. And it really was, we started to see them, people started to see Doc Gallows, who's now a part of the club in WWE, who was in WWE before that and then got released, and then he made a name for himself in New Japan. They all start doing stuff together, and more and more people start to notice the Young Bucks. They're like, who is this tag team? Who are these young guys? And then all of a sudden, they join the Bullet Club, and they're just doing all this crazy stuff, and they start to get noticed. And running that YouTube series, and also being just charismatic guys and fun guys, it got them enough notice where it started to build this popularity, where a lot of guys started watching it and started going, oh man, there's something more to these Young Bucks than just them being wrestlers.
Yeah, you kind of wonder, like, if they would have decided, or if they would have got actually offered, or however it worked out, and they left all that behind, and they went into the WWE, as they probably wouldn't even be the Young Bucks, because they'd be something completely generated by that factory. All this stuff that they're laying the groundwork for wouldn't be there. It's crazy to think how just like little things could change the path of people so much. I mean, like you said, just putting it on YouTube, giving the people the ability to see it for free. Yeah, they're not making money, but they're getting their exposure out there and really generating their brand it's really just, I mean, it's kind of a great American tale, really.
Yeah, right. It really is. It totally is a weird, great wrestling independent American tale. These guys literally went from nothing. And I mean, I guess we'll talk a little bit more about their background, but they went from nothing to actually now making a ton of money. There were some of the guys that made other wrestlers realize, hey, you can actually make money on the independents. It was enough to give Cody the courage to say to the WWE, you know what? I'm going to ask for my release, and I'm going to build myself up outside of this. Just quickly aside, Cole Cabana's documentary series was the Wrestling Road Diaries. So and I think you can still buy that. He made, I think, 2 of them, maybe 3. And you see some fun stuff on there, too. You get to experience some of these guys who are now in the mainstream before they were in the mainstream. But yeah, the Bucks, they really are kind of the American wrestling success story.
So what was some of pre AEW days, like what was some of, the Young Bucks indie wrestling history? So we know they had their own wrestling ring in the back that their dad made for them. Matt kind of trained and taught some of his friends. So, as they get this groundwork laid, they're kind of doing this and let's do this kind of thing. What are the next steps that we see the Young Bucks take?
Yeah, so they originally had their first match with, I believe, Revolution Pro, or it was kind of like this joint effort events, and so they were a part of that, and they would wrestle with them. But then Matt actually starts his own league. He calls it High Risk Wrestling, or HRW. And Nick and their other brother, their younger brother that a lot of people probably don't know about, Malachi, he actually was a wrestler too. He doesn't wrestle anymore. He stopped, I think, in 2010 because he was just exhausted from traveling and whatnot, and the payoff wasn't really that good for him. So he got out of it. He retired. I'm not sure if he's actually ever made any in-ring returns periodically throughout 2010 till now. He might have, he might not have. I don't know. But they helped him out. They're also their friend Dustin Cutler, which I believe is the brother to Brandon. Yeah, Brandon Cutler. I'm pretty sure he helped them out too with the High Risk Wrestling, and that actually ran until 2009.
Oh wow!
So yeah, they had a good little run with it. They had some names with them. Carl Anderson wrestled with them. I know Marty Jannetty, Joey Ryan. Yeah, they've had some names. California was a great area for wrestling, independent wrestling, and still is arguably, but it was just a good time in the 2000s for it.
So was that all kind of like backyard type stuff, like with their kind of the ring they set up, or did they have their own ring that went into, different small venues?
I think it's a little of A and B, really. I mean, all the stuff that I had ever seen was kind of outdoors stuff. And I don't know if they might not care, but I know other people might get a little offended if you called that backyard wrestling, just because of, ran a little bit more professionally. But I know they had some good matches, that's for sure, whether or not it was all outdoors or not. I couldn't answer that question for you 100%, but there is some stuff, especially if you watch Being the Elite, they'll throw little things here and there into it, not like full on stuff, but I'm sure you can catch some stuff on YouTube as well. They actually didn't get their nicknames though, the Young Bucks, until it came to Full Contact Wrestling. Matt was originally called Mr. Instant Replay and Nick was Slick Nick.
Nice.
And I don't know who it was, but someone came up with the last name Jackson for him. And so they've always been the Young Bucks, Nick and Matt Jackson. And they've also done some brief stuff with NWA, which I think everyone now knows. If you're watching, NWA has a long history in its own. And now you might know it as the wrestling promotion that Billy Corgan runs. He bought it, and now he's doing great things with the name. And then they moved on to Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. And PWG is just in its own. That thing could have its own episode. We could even talk about that, look at Excalibur and whatnot, and just all the names that went in and out of that. And they started with PWG in 2007. Became really liked. They had this great title run between 2008 to 2010. They held the titles for 616 days until they lost it to El Generico, aka Sami Zayn, if you watch WWE, and Paul London. And during that time also, they wrestled for Dragon Gate. I think we've briefly mentioned that, Shima's promotion. They did the stint with WWE. They did some stuff with Chikara. Chikara is kind of comedy wrestling. Depending on who you talk to, some really like it, some hate it, some don't like the guy behind it. There's wrestling drama there, but you can't take anything away from Chikara, where they've had a good run during that time, where it brought a lot of new fans into wrestling, or people got to experience new stuff and saw that, hey, wrestling can be fun. It doesn't have to always be serious. They also had their stint with Ring of Honor, which I think a lot of people know them for, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, and TNA. And TNA, Total Nonstop Action Wrestling, that's where arguably they could have been known to get their name on the map, but they weren't the Young Bucks there. And TNA, they're only known as Generation Me, Max and Jeremy Buck. And though they had some good matches there, things didn't really pan out for them. And it's at this time that Matt actually literally has $0 in his bank account, and he has to ask Nick for $3 for like a chicken sandwich at Popeyes or something like that.
Wow.
And so he has to borrow money from his brother. And I think at that time he was married and he might have had a kid on the way or something along those lines. So he was really going, should I stay in wrestling or should I get out? And luckily they stayed. And they went with ROH from 2009 until 2018. And they also had a great run with New Japan Wrestling. And the great thing about ROH is ROH has been usually pretty good to the independent guys. Not too many guys have to sign exclusive contracts with ROH. ROH will let guys take other promotions and other dates. That's the great thing about the indies is you either have to pay them someone a lot to keep them, or you can say, hey, we'll do some crossover stuff. So really, they get into New Japan because of Okada. And they met Okada in TNA when Okada also got hit with a disrespectful wrestling role, as basically he played Kato, the Green Hornet, if you're familiar with that. That was basically his character, and it wasn't that good. And now look at Okada. But yeah, New Japan and ROH is really when they start to blossom. People start to see them. They start to have some really terrific matches between the two. And we could also spend a whole another episode just talking on their New Japan run and their ROH stuff as well. That was my first experience in person with them, was ROH. So, I mean, to me, that was pretty cool to get to see them, get to be a part of essentially wrestling history.
Do you remember the first match you saw them in?
Oh, man. Gosh, honestly, I could not tell you. They came around. ROH was really great coming around to the Michigan area. ROH has always been good to the Midwest. And I used to watch them in Dearborn, and then they got a little bit too big for the venue and then moved up into the Royal Oak area. If anyone's listening and they're from the area, they'll know what I'm talking about. But I was watching them when they were in the Dearborn years, and they did some like 6-man tag stuff towards the end of it. And, they were just doing their thing here. And it was really cool to see them. And that's kind of my introduction in person to them. It's one thing to watch them on YouTube and TV and whatnot. It's another thing to see them in person. So
the crossover, I know New Japan it seems like that's where Kenny Omega really took off. When did the Kenny Omega Young Bucks, as like I said, I kind of started getting to be the Elite, and they seem to already have this connection. When did that kind of friendship start to develop? Do you know?
Yeah. So they joined the Bucks joined the Bullet Club in 2013, like the end of 2013. And so that's where they really start to come into play here. And then we see that Kenny Omega, I want to say he joins the Bullet Club in New Japan in 2016, I think. Maybe 2015-ish. I want to say 2016. And Kenny had been at that time wrestling for some other promotions as well. I think DDT and possibly Pro Wrestling Noah. I could be wrong on that. I might be getting some facts mixed up with other people, other wrestlers. But yeah, it's around 2016 that they all get together and they start to form. They form in the Bullet Club a subgroup called the Elites. And this basically starts to happen after AJ Styles gets kicked out of the Bullet Club. And this is where we see AJ Styles going into WWE now. So then once AJ Styles is out, now it's arguably kind of Kenny Omega's arguably the leader of the Bullet Club. We see this breaking off with the Elites. And that's when they start doing their thing. And then you start to see really the seeds have been planted for the inner turmoil of the Bullet Club. Hey, is the Bullet Club going to split? spoilers, Bullet Club's still together, but there's only a few different members in it. There's only like a couple original guys and then new members now. So, but it's not nearly what it was at the time. This is where arguably you're seeing around, I would say 2014, 2015, definitely between 2015 and 2016, people are loving the Bullet Club.
Yeah, I know, like I said, I fell out of wrestling for a long time, and that was a shirt that was like something that was in, like, I didn't know what it was about, I didn't know where it was from, but I knew Bullet Club was this big wrestling thing. Like, it made it to the, I would say, at least the mainstream of what I was involved in. Mm-hmm. And I've wanted to go back and kind of research that, because I feel like that was an awesome takeover and an awesome storyline that just missed out so much on. And that's just New Japan, right? That's the only place that the Bullet Club kind of takes place.
Well, it starts in New Japan, and then it kind of spreads itself. You get Ring of Honor, because they had such a good relationship. Actually, what's funny is I got my Bullet Club t-shirt at a Ring of Honor events because it was at the time you couldn't get it anywhere else.
Oh, wow.
And the only other way you could get it was if you talked to some of the guys online that would ship from Japan to the States. But the prices were really outrageous and understandable because, you had to pay all that shipping and whatnot. So I said, you know what, I'll wait till I know ROH is going to have some. And sure enough, they did. And then pretty much like a month or so later, Pro Wrestling Tees pops up, and it really puts Pro Wrestling Tees on the map. And I mean, we could talk about Pro Wrestling Tees as well, but they get on the map, and they get this license deal to start printing New Japan articles of clothing in the U.S. And then it really starts to take off. Then you start seeing the Bucks and Pro Wrestling Tees making these deals with Hot Topic, and things just go crazy. People buying the shirt because they have no clue what the Bullet Club is. And it's kind of funny because at the same time, the Bullet Club is kind of controversial because of all the stuff that's been happening in the US. And so it was really like back again, it reminded me, this is how cool this was. Not only, I know a lot of people equate Bullet Club to NWO, and obviously so because of the whole two suites and whatnot, but it reminded me of Austin 316 and the controversy behind that. I know a lot of people love it or hate it. I remember wearing an Austin 316 shirt and having teachers in school be like, what's that all about? And thought it was some anti-religious shirt or blasphemy. And I'd have to tell them it's a wrestling thing. And then they go, oh, okay. But even outside of that, parents going, I heard what Austin 316 means. You're not wearing that shirt. So at this time, the Bullet Club people are thinking it's this huge, like, far right, pro guns movement. And you had to sit there and explain yourself again. You're like, it's a wrestling thing, which is kind of making fun of America and its ideas on guns and ideology and whatnot. But, it's, that's just how crazy it was. And then now it got to the point, now we've reached that point where you're wearing a Bullet Club shirt and you're like, bro, man, it's way past that. No one cares about the Bullet Club anymore.
Yeah. And you said they shifted off, and they kind of created and owned the Elite, right? Like, that's their specific thing. So
yeah.
And again, that kind of goes with the Be the Elite. And was that really just the Bucks and Omega, or was it just the Bucks that kind of started that first?
I mean, it was kind of, I don't know if they came up with the name on their own. I've always associated it with the three of them. I think that's something that they actually all came up with. And originally, it was just the three, but then all of a sudden you started to see Cody become a part of it. And then you had the villain, Marty Scurll, who was a part of it, who is currently in ROH, and also the Hangman, Adam Page. Those guys were the subgroup, and it started to become its own thing, because then people were like, well, is Cody really in the Bullet Club, or is Cody not in the Bullet Club? He's in the Elite, but he's not in the Bullet Club. It was just really weird.
So with these guys, when you want to explain, like, if you're giving me the video game rundown of the Young Bucks, like, what's some of their signature moves, chants, like, what are some of the things that they're known for in the ring, kind of outside of the ring?
Yeah, the great thing about the Bucks, and I know we've briefly mentioned it on some of these episodes too, was the fact that the Bucks took being a wrestling fan and they turned it to 11. So they would take some of the old stuff and, with the help of Gallows and Anderson, they would do just kind of like all this fun stuff. And it came from joking around, like Doc Gallows and Carl Anderson would do their best Stone Cold Steve Austin impersonations and whatnot. So you'd have those guys with the Bucks and whatnot doing all these fun Stone Cold impressions. And then, they all started doing the Too Sweet. They brought the Too Sweet back and they thought it was such a cool thing. And it really was. And so they would do the Too Sweet and they would do the Too Sweet on camera. And then people are like, ooh, look at these bad boys. Like, that's a WWE thing now. That was a WCW, and WCW got bought by WWE. And look at you guys. And it got to the point, it got them more famous because they got the cease and desist letter. And then, then that really amped it up. And then everyone was like, oh, look at these rebels, man. These guys are making a name for themselves, and they're not even in the WWE. So they would do the Too Sweet, they would do the Suck It, and, really those are the things that everyone kind of knows them for. I know they do some other stuff as well, but that's kind of the thing that really grew with them, that people loved. And even though they were having fun with that, wrestling was still fun to them. And they've done some other stuff where they've done like the more bang for your buck. That's They're that rolling fireman's carry slam, and then Matt does that, and Nick does that 450 splash. Then Matt does the moonsault. One thing that people kind of, I think, casual wrestling fans at the time, they knew of the Meltzer driver, and which that was a springboard somersault where they spike their opponent with a reverse pile driver, and that really had people like cracking up, and they loved it. And so they did the Meltzer driver, and then they have another Meltzer move, and I'm totally blanking on it now, and I can't believe I'm blanking on it.
And I assume that's in a reference to the famous article guy, Meltzer. Dave
Meltzer, yes. That's definitely for him. They nickname him Uncle Dave, and they had two different moves that they did with it. And I'm totally blanking now, and I'm really sorry about that. But yeah, it eventually went into them doing all that. And then there was a time in 2017, I think it was, that they hit like what they called the ultimate Meltzer driver. And it was in memory of Dave Meltzer's dad. They did that, and that was kind of a cool little thing for them. They've always had this just fun adoration for Dave Meltzer, and even though Meltz really enjoys them, but I think at the time they only had one 5-star match with them, and that's it's not like Dave Meltzer is constantly like 5 stars Bucks, 5 stars Bucks, but they had this great back and forth. Was it called the Indie Driver? Maybe that's what I'm thinking. It might not be the Meltzer Driver, or they have the Meltzer Driver, but I think they might have called it another move, the Indie Driver, but I'm totally blanking, and I'm sorry on that. And then, what else do they have? Nick, like I said, does that 450 splash. Matt does the worst case scenario, which is it's a victory roll flipped into a modified wheelbarrow face buster. And it's easier to say that. It's easier to watch than to say that and try to explain what it is. So they do that. And then now, they've gone through some different entrance themes. I know some might remember them with the Bop by Hanson. They did the double barrel. That was their New Japan theme. Super Kick Party right now they do, and I think that's what their AEW theme is, and they would come out with New Japan with that as well. So that's kind of what they're known for. They also are known for I can't mention it without, if I did not mention this, people would totally flip out, but super kicks.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, you know, the love for Shawn Michaels and whatnot, they would do super kicks. And they would do this, what they called the early onset Alzheimer's, which were double super kicks basically in unison and hitting their opponent. And they were infamously known, and maybe you know this, maybe you don't, because this is where they were starting to get their name out there. They super kicked a little child, and it was absolutely hilarious and awesome. And the kids sold it so well. It was great.
Well, I know some of the Be the Elite's the first one, they super kick their dad.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to say,
awesome.
They did the ice bucket challenge where they were kind of playing heels and at the time, and they're like, yeah, we're going to do it. And then they super kicked their dad, and they're like, ha, you think we would do the ice bucket challenge? You know, and so their dad gets the ice bucket on him. I thought that was awesome. Pretty funny too. So
his dad looks like an old school wrestler too.
I know.
In some of the videos I've seen of him.
I know, man. I know. And that's the thing. I can't recall if their dad was ever really a wrestling fan. I think he was just a casual fan, and it really exploded with the boys.
That's awesome. That's the thing. Like, you want, like, if your kids really love something, like, to be able to jump in and be like, well, yeah, sure, I'll build you in the backyard. Just don't hurt yourselves.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I think their dad was into construction or carpentry or something before this.
Oh,
still,
cool.
I think he still does it, but you know, he would do music on the side. He's more of a music guy.
Well, I'm. You know, again, I don't know a ton about this stuff, about the Bucks, but I can read Wikipedia, and I was going to go through some of their championships and accomplishments because there are tons. So they were the AWS Tag Team Champions. They were the DDT, the Iron Man Heavyweight Championship. In Demand Lucha, they have the Royal Canadian Tag Team Championship. In Dragon Gate, the United Gate Championship. The EWF Tag Team Championship, the FWE Tag Team Championship, the FSW Tag Team Championship. In the High Risk Wrestler, it was the Soul Survivor Tournament winners. In House of Glory, they were the HOG Tag Champions. The Lucha AAA Champions, which they just recently won. In Pro Wrestling Illustrated, they were the Tag Team of the Year in 2017 and 2018. Nick Jackson was ranked 38th, and Matt Jackson was ranked 40th in 2018. Talked about Ring of Honor, the six-man tag team champions twice, and they're also the ROH World Tag Team Champions 3 times in Tag Team of the Year in 2017. And a Wrestler Observer, they were the best wrestling maneuver, the more bang for your buck, which you mentioned, in 2009. The best wrestling maneuver in 2014, the Meltzer Driver, and they were the Tag Team of the Year for 4 years running in 2014 through 2018. So, I mean, these guys are definitely on the map for sure. And do you think the Tag Team of the Year is that a little bit of lack of high profile tag teams that they're trying to bring back?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. There had been some great tag teams, but a lot of it kind of at the time was guys just kind of doing these who were singles guys, and then they just got together to form some tag team. You saw a lot of that stuff kind of like with Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, PWG, and though there were some great tag teams overall, WWE really started to stray from tag teams, and the Bucks were just kind of that old school kind of feel of a tag team. These guys were more like, hey, we realize we want to be a tag team, versus guys who are like, hey, I want to do a singles run, and then, yeah, sure, I'll do some tag team work. And so, I mean, that's no surprise that they won Tag Team of the Year for 4 years in a row or so. But New Japan had some good tag teams, and ROH did as well. The Briscoes, that's one that you can ultimately think of. The Hardys were still tagging. Well, at that time, okay, I take that back. The Hardys didn't really start to tag together again until pretty much their TNA stuff. And then, you know, they had a good run with that. And, you had the Dudleys, they were still doing their thing, or Team 3D, depending on, you know, they were in TNA. And then they broke up, they split off, and then they came back into WWE. And so, gosh, it was warranted enough for them to be best tag team. There was some good tag teams out there, but it wasn't that big of a field, especially in WWE. You had like the Usos and whatnot that are arguably a great tag team. The New Day, which were starting to come up, and you would actually start to see, thanks to being the Elite and Kenny Omega, a little bit of the back and forth stuff between what they could get away with that maybe some of the higher ups didn't know about in WWE. That they could do, like for one segment with New Day, for instance, having like a broom, and Kenny was known as the sweeper. And so like Big E's sweeping, and you can see it's a nod, to them, but they got away with it. So there's some good stuff. And then now you have more and more tag teams being built up, and because thanks to pretty much the NXT and whatnot, but yeah, the Bucks were pretty much the tag team around the time.
Yeah, and I've always been a huge tag team fan, so I'm excited to kind of see like they're really emphasizing that with AEW. So, and like the Young Bucks just kind of get to see some of their matches just recently, really enjoying that stuff too.
Oh yeah.
So kind of the 5-star match, I guess, where we talk about like some of their historical matches. We had somebody talk to us on Twitter. Jay Ronan said that the Young Bucks versus the Golden Lovers from Strong Style Evolved is an awesome match. Did you ever get to see that match?
No, I actually have not seen that match. Though to me, that would be a great match. You wouldn't have to try to convince me otherwise. Just seeing that name on paper, I would say, hell yeah, that's a good one.
Do you have a match that you can kind of think of that when you think of them, kind of you gravitate towards?
Oh man, there's a lot, to be completely honest. Like there's a good handful, and if you wanted to, I'll give credit where credit's due. User Plebastian MC posted on Reddit on Squared Circle a list of the Bucks' best matches, and arguably, some people might be like, well, everyone has an opinion, right? But they had a great back and forth between the Motor City Machine Guns and their TNA run, which I'm pretty sure you can find on YouTube. There's stuff with the Hardys. Oh, they had some great stuff with the Hardys as well. The Bucks and Jeff Cobb and Matt Riddle. Check that one out. That was PWG. The Bucks and the Briscoes, they had some good back and forth as well. The ROH Final Battle, that was 2016. Man, there was, the Bucks versus Beretta and Rocky Romero for the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Tag Team Championship. That was in 2017. That's another good one as well. And I mean, it can go on and on. They've just had some great stuff. Honestly, it's like, okay, well, who did the Bucks have good matches against where it could be considered like, hey, this is a good rivalry? I would say like Motor City Machine Guns. That's a good one in their TNA run. They had a great it was a 6-man tag for the 6-man tag team championship. And I believe Christopher Daniels it might have been, I think Christopher Daniels said it. He said that was one of his favorite matches of all times, in which it was the Young Bucks and Hangman Page versus SCU. And that was more recent. That was actually last year, 2018, September. So try to check that one out. I honestly, New Japan Strong Style Evolved, I've never seen that one, and I'm going to have to check that out. And that was at a time where I had the New Japan Network, so, I can't give a good enough excuse as why, besides I didn't have enough time. So,
well, I feel like I was just kind of skimming through YouTube real quick, like the Hardy Boys versus Young Bucks. There's a bunch of matches they have on here.
Yeah,
just some in places like you wouldn't even think to see them. So I've already got like my next like 3 days planned.
Oh yeah. Oh, another. I hate to not mention this too. Young Bucks versus Red Dragon. Red Dragon is now part of Undisputed Era. Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly. They are an awesome tag team, and they had some great stuff in ROH as well with them. So you got to check that out as well.
Well, before we jump into our Under the Ring news, do you have anything else you want to tidy up with the Young Bucks?
Oh man. Not only, I would say, honestly, if you want to get to know the Young Bucks, check out the Being the Elite and start watching it from the beginning, and you get a really good taste of who these guys are. They're pretty, although their characters are so over the top, and their characters were loud and obnoxious, and at the time they were kind of poking fun at how older generations look at the younger generations. You know, they did a great job with stuff, but then when you get to see Being the Elite, you don't think that they're just some assholes. You get to see that they're funny guys, and they have just a good time with what they've been given. And you'll see too, just throughout some of these matches, what these guys are able to do. And it's fun just in general watching Being the Elite, and to see the evolution of what finally becomes All Elite Wrestling. I mean, today they put out Being the Elite episodes on every Monday. And as we record this, you know, right before earlier, I was watching the latest episode, and I still hooked. I just love watching it.
Yeah, it's pretty, like, I started watching the newer ones when we started getting into this. And so I was like, well, I'm going to go back and watch it. And it's two completely different styles that they've done.
Yeah.
But because now it's a little bit more skits, and, you know, they kind of are comfortable in their shells and a lot of AEW focused stuff. But the early stuff is like, you get to see behind the scenes. They're doing a little bit of skit work, but a little bit of promoing. But it's really cool just to get that little peek behind the curtain. You kind of get to know the people behind the people. And it's just really, really cool to me.
Yeah, right.
All right, well, we'll jump into a little bit of the under the ring news. We'll just kind of go more towards AEW. So there's a big thing coming up for the very first Road to All Out, and it's going to be Jim Ross with a sit-down interview with Shawn Spears. And it's going to basically be him talking about the attack on Cody Rhodes at AEW Fyter Fest. So this is coming from amp.wrestlinginc.com, and it says, one of the more shocking moments at last month's AEW Fyter Fest was Cody taking an unprotected chair shot to the head at the hands of Shawn Spears. The result of the attack was Cody requiring 10 staples to close up the wound in the back of his head. During the lead up to the show, Cody had given his thoughts about Spears in an episode of Road to Fyter Fest, which looks to be the reason for Spears lashing out. So Cody said he could potentially be a player/coach, eventually a coach. Great for the young guys, and he's a great hand, a utility guy, a good worker, not a star. So earlier today when this article came out, which was July 7th, it was announced that Spears will have a sit-down interview with Jim Ross to explain his actions. The interview will take place on the first episode of the Road to All Out. So I'm really excited about that, because that kind of gives you the interview style, because Jim Ross used to do that stuff back in the day, which was really, really cool. And so I'm really excited to see that part of it here too.
Oh, yeah, right. I mean, arguably that's kind of what put Mick Foley on the map and helped with Stone Cold too, when Jim Ross used to do those. And that Mick Foley interview session that they did was absolutely great. That did a great job of turning Mick pretty much face. And the Stone Cold stuff's just iconic, so I'll be happy to see that. That'll be fun.
All right, and as you know, Saturday is Fight for the Fallen, so we have the card. I'm not sure if there's going to be anything else added, but I was going to run through some of the matches. So
yeah,
one thing that has been announced is Chris Jericho will be appearing. So we'll get some appearance from Chris Jericho. Will it be him, walking, asking for his thank you, or him doing maybe a squash match, or maybe just him, talking for 10 minutes about how amazing he is? I'm not sure what it'll be, but he will be there.
Yeah.
I'm excited for this one. It's a 6-man tag. It's Darby Allin, Jimmy Havoc, and Joey Janela versus MJF, Sammy Guevara, and Shawn Spears.
Yeah, that should be pretty good. A little interesting combination of people, especially now with MJF not really liking Shawn Spears.
Yeah.
So I'm very interested to see how that's going to go with that team dynamic. And also to see a great 3 guys where Darby Allin could essentially learn from just both Joey Janela and Jimmy Havoc. If anything, Darby should probably be like under Jimmy Havoc's wing, try to learn as much as he can from him, because that's just a wealth of knowledge right there.
That'd be a good tag team.
Yeah, right.
Havoc and Allin.
That might be a possibility. Yeah.
And we got our dark horse, Sammy Guevara, the Panda Heart. Like, he's in this match. I mean, come on.
That's right. The Panda Heart. That's totally right. I hope that sticks.
Yeah, I've been hashtagging it and putting him in like a tweet every day. And he's liked one of them, so surely that's going to be on a t-shirt.
You're welcome, Panda Heart.
But I like to. Have you watched the Road to Fight to the Fallen yet? The second episode.
Oh man, I want to say yeah, but
because they have a MJF and Shawn Spears in the background after the attack.
Yes, they did. Yeah, and they had the security guards there.
Yeah.
Right? Yes, yep.
So I'm really excited to see how that turns out.
Yeah.
We get Kenny Omega versus CIMA.
Yeah, so I was right.
Yeah, you said that the winner of the match last Fyter Fest was going to fight Kenny Omega. We'll see that here. I'm guessing we'll probably see John Moxley coming through on that.
Yeah, right. Who knows? We might see him show up.
We get Brandy Rhodes versus Allie, so we get to see Brandy Rhodes getting into the squared circle.
Yes. Yeah, making her debut for AEW as a wrestler.
Interesting matchup here. Hangman Adam Page versus Kip Sabian in a one-on-one match. So curious to see how that one goes.
Yeah, right. They didn't do much of a build-up with that other than, Kip Sabian gets to win or wrestle the winner of that four-way that they had. So it should possibly be a good match. Hopefully it is.
And then the main event for this will be the Young Bucks versus Cody and Dustin Rhodes. So we get to see the "I need my older brother" paying off here.
Yeah, right. That one's going to be fun. I love what they've been doing with that. Did you mention SCU versus the Lucha Brothers?
No, that was just announced today, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yes. Yep. They just announced it today on Being the Elite. And Christopher Daniels is going to be in their corner. So he'll be there, but he's not going to be wrestling. It's going to be Frankie Kazarian, and Scorpio Sky versus the Lucha Brothers. Yeah,
it should be an interesting card. I mean, there's 7 matches now with the SCU one being added. This is 2 weeks after Fyter Fest, so 2 pretty big, what you consider pay-per-views, relatively close. So I'm excited for it to show up. It's another free one as well, which is very exciting.
Yeah, right. That's very nice, and all of the. I think they said all of the proceeds go towards helping the families in that situation that happened at the Madden tournament. And they're going to try their best to do that. It's going to be, I think it's one of those, hey, once they are able to, you got to pay everything that goes into it, but then anything that's made off of that goes to the people. And that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I hope they do some kind of call-in number or donation line. Because, I mean, if you're watching this for free, why not throw in an extra $10, $15 or $20 or $30 or whatever you would do
that's
just to kind of help out?
Yeah, that's a great idea, man. I do hope they do that. That's a really good. UFC would do that for their Fight for the Troops stuff. And I mean, cool. I donated to that, and I'd be more than happy to do that again here to donate to something like this. I think that's awesome, and maybe that's something that we tweet at them, say, hey, is there any way that we can, fans watching can donate? And maybe they do have something, but at least we'll get some answer, hopefully.
And the last thing for the actual In the Ring news. So I stumbled across this awesome thing. It's been around for a while. It's pro wrestling scorecards. And what these are, it's basically like fantasy football, but for wrestling. Mm-hmm. And if you go to the website, I'm going to include where the one for Fight for the Fallen is. But if you go to their website, you can see the one they had for Fyter Fest. And essentially, you pick from how the match will end, how many pinfalls attempts are going to be, all kinds of different things. You get points for it, and you accumulate it and get a score. So the Fight for the Fallen one comes out July 10th, and we'll be tweeting this out, and we're hoping that you guys jump on this. Send us yours before Fight for the Fallen starts, and what we'll do is we'll kind of get these scores together, and then we'll kind of get a winner, and maybe we could build kind of like a BEP fantasy league off this or something, going into All Out and then, future events. But I kind of think it might be kind of fun to do. John and I are going to try it out, and if you want to join us in for Fight for the Fallen, feel free. Again, I'll have the link out there. It's ProWrestlingScorecards.com. Kind of an exciting, cool idea.
Yeah, right. That'll be fun. That'd be kind of cool to get with some people on Twitter and whatnot, and we'll try to fill ours out and then post them, right, so that people can see ours and they can't be like, "You guys were liars." And, oh, I got perfect scores on everything.
Oh, I'm a genius. I should book this stuff.
Look at me.
And I found this article is kind of interesting. It kind of goes with our PodRocker theme. So in our Breaking Kayfabe, one of the things I saw was it was an interview with Shawn Michaels, basically my hero growing up. And it was, does Shawn Michaels still speak to Marty Jannetty? And I'll read through this really quick. So they have kind of 3 quick little things they brought from it. But this comes from lordsofpain.net. It was, Shawn Michaels was recently interviewed by Challenge Mania. During the interviews, he discussed the grumblings that WWE wrestlers were restricted creatively and revealed whether he still talks to Marty Jannetty. So on the question on if he felt that his creativity was restricted, he said, they never micromanaged me. I had a lot more experience. They knew my strengths and worked to those strengths. I understand a lot of people's frustrations with the micromanaging, but that all started with there being a lot of inexperience and not a lot of good work being put out there first. It's a double-edged sword. There was a lot of inexperience at one time coming up with talent being able to get some of those experiences or nuances the company wanted. And then he was asked on the thinking lack of experience leads to wrestlers being micromanaged. He says, that was a very short-lived thing. As people began to get better, this generation started to have a much better understanding of what they are looking for. I will certainly agree it can be overdone and a great deal of micromanaging. And then the key of this was if he still speaks to Marty Jannetty, and it's a little sad to me. He says, I no longer have a contact number for him. There are times I see him. He's great. He seems great. Other times, it's a less so. It's heartbreaking to me, just as it is to everyone else. I don't know what any of us can do in that aspect. He has made a decision on how he wants to live his life. Truth be told, it's not my place or anyone else's to tell him how. All we can do is care about him when it's not going well, care for him. At WrestleMania, I was asked. There were people trying to find him and couldn't. There were people trying to reach out to him. I'm not aware of any way to get a hold of him. So essentially, it sounds like he kind of runs into him at times. And I feel like this is kind of a tale of warning for the PodRockers. Like, we cannot become the true Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty. We got to be the Shawn Michael and party Johnnetty and keep this PodRocker party going.
That's right, baby. That's definitely right. If anything, we got to learn from their mistakes and keep pushing forward, and we just keep rocking.
And as always, we got our From the Stand section. So this is where, we don't have anything for this one except for the one I mentioned up earlier from Jay Ronan. But make sure if you guys have anything, leave us feedbacks. We also have like that Wisecrack promo. We haven't gotten any recently, so I'm not sure if he's still hiding in my closet or in my bathtub or in my bed. But if you have a promo, send it to us, record it on your phone, send it our way, send it to podrockers@beelite.com, and you could be featured in one of our episodes.
Yeah, man. I please someone do that because I'm still scared of Wisecrack. I'd rather Wisecrack take on someone else than us.
All right. Well, Party Johnnetty, can you tell us what's coming up next?
Yep. Our next episode, we will be reviewing AEW's Fight for the Fallen, which takes place this Saturday, July 13th, 2019, from Daly's Place in Jacksonville, Florida.
And PodRocker Nation, reach out to BEP by following us on Twitter at BElitePod and Instagram at BElitePodcast. You can email questions, comments, or those lovely, lovely promos to podrockers@BeElitePod.com. Like us on Facebook by searching for Be Elite Pod.
We are desperately out of time for this week's Be Elite Pod, but until next time, I'm Party Johnnetty.
And I'm Shawn Michaels saying so long from our BEP Home Elite Studios.
And remember, get off the street and be elite.